Yo guys, what is up? I'm so excited for this part two, Universalgenie. I learned so much more, probably twice as more in this analysis and all the research that I did to put this video together than I did in the first part. So I'm super excited to go over it. I hope you guys are excited. Um, I just want to mention that I only did this again, this part two, because of the 14 likes, the comments that I got, and the subscribers that were brought to me because of this video. Even though there weren't that many views, the quality of feedback was very good. So I just want to say thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for commenting and liking. Obviously, all those things plus subscribing, they really help me out a lot because I really do enjoy this. So go ahead right now and like and subscribe, and we're gonna get right into this part two. So of course, for those of you guys that missed part one, I would suggest going back and watching part one. Especially if you're American or English speaker and you don't know the song already. If you're German and maybe it doesn't matter, but just go over again this song. From what I've interpreted as is a sophisticated metaphor. Kollegah's defining himself as this prominent figure in Deutsch rap, in German rap, by referencing religion, science, philosophy, and just overall intellect and his intellectual competence and how he should be considered much more than just a writer, but somebody who has a wider grasp on the meaning of the world. And he brings all of that into his raps, and you see throughout his references that I mean, just like reading through it, first I'm reading through it, listening and translating, and I don't even know what I have to look up a lot of the figures, a lot of the anecdotes that he brings in. So it was really cool. It was really fun, and so I mean, at this point, I'm definitely doing part three, and then yeah, so then we have the first verse, which we're gonna go ahead and listen to it first. Ah, oh, of course, the hook. I didn't talk about the hook last time, but it's I guess it's in it's in no surprise in a great Kollegah fashion that he he has this song that is using um, grammatically sophisticated structure, referencing all of these academic names, phrases, and concepts, and then he samples. I forget. I didn't really look at who. I forget who this song is from. And then he samples in his hook. Blowing the haze, cocaine in the crack, just like completely goes in the other direction, It has nothing to do with the rest of the song, but somehow it works, It's almost like he smothers you with all of this information, and then he backs off and kind of just like, here's a really easy hook. There's no digestion really involved here, really simple. And then he goes back, into and then gets each verse, in my opinion, at least in the second one, from the first to the second, intensifies, and it's cushioned in between by this really meaningless, soft hook that's still catchy, but it's nothing to do with the rest of the song, which I think it's funny and seemingly appropriate. It's pretty interesting that he did it like that. I think it's on purpose. Um, so yeah, that's what I mean. It's cocaine in the cracks. I mean, it's really no point to the hook. So let's let that play into the first verse. Sapere Ode. So, I mean, that rhyme scheme is really nice, right? Sapere Ode, Kanäle auf, Berie auf, Materie aus, Meeresrausch. ein tausender Gedankenstrom, ein Tsunami, der in Tiefen des Ozeans des Verstandes tobt. So, here's my translation, so I didn't translate Separa Aura just because I think it's a phrase that should be, just like I said in the last video with Universalgenie, it should stay how it is. Separa Aura, unlock the passages, a larger mind breaks the barrier, and out of the material, I am a sea of thunderous thoughts, a tsunami that stirs the deep oceans of intelligence. So he's he's first playing off of this this famous quote, which is there's a lot of debate on who first wrote this phrase, and then he's expanding that into a larger metaphor and how he is really he dives really deep into these deep intellectual um, theaters that are often very hard to discover, like the ocean itself, right? So what I've written here is Sepra Auda. I mean, it was Latin, is originally a Latin phrase. Some say that it also comes from um, much further back. Um, it has origins in the Middle East, but it's first documented use is with this Roman poet Horace, and is greatly associated with the Age of Enlightenment, and that has a lot to do with the rest of the song as a whole, because he speaks about becoming enlightened, right? Because Sepra Auda means knowledge is no, sorry, that's the next line. Sepra Auda means like dare to know, like challenge yourself to know yourself. And it actually does complement the next verse, the next line. And he's saying Kollegah understands, that transcending the human mind to an all-capable state, one has to break the limits of what is commonly perceived as possible. So he's saying, by diving deeper and deeper into these really tough thoughts, these difficult thoughts, you're actually unlocking the passages to further enlightenment as a human, because some may regard enlightenment as the overall like mission as any human, since our documented history. And of course, he uses the ocean as a metaphor for this entire idea, because the ocean still is like 95% unexplored. No, we really don't know. We know more about space than the actual ocean, just because of how difficult it is to achieve. Again, much like um some of these thoughts, these ideas that Kollegah is searching for. Let's go back there. Wissen ist Macht, and you see, I like in the last video, I highlighted the rhyme scheme, so you can kind of keep track of how he's blending this all together, because I think outside of what he's actually talking about and the references that he's making, just the syllables and the way that he actually still manages to rhyme line after line is equally impressive. So Wissen ist Macht. Ein scharfes Schwert hat weit weniger vernichtende Kraft als manch verblichenes Blatt. Wissen ist Macht, vernichtende Kraft, verblichenes Blatt, lichende Nacht. It sounds so good, right? And then let's finish the rest of the line. Ja, nach Erleuchtung streben in bedeutungsschweren Texten der Freudschen Lehre. So what he's saying here is that knowledge is power, and this goes back to Sepra Auda. Sepra Auda is like dare to know, dare to get knowledge, like challenge yourself to get knowledge, because the more you know, knowledge is power. And he says, he says, ein scharfes Schwert hat weit weniger vernichtenden Kraft als as a dull blade. A sharp sword has far less devastating power than many dull blades. I am a light in the night, striving for enlightenment in the larger meaning text of Freud's lessons. So here's really our first philosophical figure he's referencing in this verse. But what he's saying ultimately is that the more knowledge you have, while knowledge on the surface is seemingly harmless, right? Yet still more, figuratively dangerous than a sharp blade, which you can relate this to like weapons or like actual violence. It's that this knowledge, having more knowledge, will have more power in the long run than physical violence, which is just commonly it's easier, it's easier to go after violence than it is to actually take the time and accumulate this vast knowledge, as Kollegah references here. Then he says, I'm a light in the night, striving for enlightenment. Again, back to Sepra Auda. He sees his quest for enlightenment. He's saying that he's a light in the dark, for humanity, showing through his text, through his rap text, that there is still hope in even the darkest times of German rap. To that there is actually something more to be had. I really like this line just because it really connects to the last one. He does two quotes, Sepra Auda, and then knowledge is power, and scientia potentia est is philosophical quote, which is very also widely debated who said it first, but it's remained as one of the cornerstones for modern philosophy. Is that the more you know, the better off you will be, right? Ist verschlüsselt, wie die Schriften Kafkas, die ich mit der Weisheit Einsteins erforsche wie Wissenschaftler. Was ich weiß, ist selten schon bekannt, weil sich mir zukünftige Welten offenbaren, wie Michel de Nostradam mit großem... So, der Mensch an sich ist verschlüsselt wie die Schriften Kafkas. I didn't know this guy, Francis. Is it Francis Kafkas? Yeah, so he's saying the human is intricate and encrypted like the text of Kafka's, in which I study with the wisdom of Einstein, like a scientist or like a scholar. What I know is rarely established, because the future of the world is obvious to me, much like Michael Nostradamus. And so what he's saying here is, now he's talking about the psychology of the human. He's finding deep into his reflections that the human mind is very much encrypted, and hard to analyze. And he draws a parallel to Francis Kafka, who is largely credited as one of the most profound writers of the 20th century, who writes or wrote these fictitious stories about with themes of human transformation and existential struggle, and it was widely regarded. Critics still debate on whether or not his meanings were, had political allusions, just philosophical and psychological allusions. And so many say that he wrote these texts to be intentionally confusing, um, and therefore encrypted. So they're very complicated, and they're not exactly straightforward, much like the human mind. This is the comparison he's drawing here. And then, of course, we know Nostradamus, in his Centurion works, that he's to, regarded as to have prophesized many global events. Kollegah is saying here that based on finding all of this knowledge, history repeats itself. Therefore, he can tell what's going to happen in the future based off of his studies that he's done, uh, and considers the nature of his studies much like Einstein. Right? We know who Albert Einstein is. Mit großer Verstandeskraft, right? This is again another nice way to say knowledge. He's discovering the messages, right, in the symphonies of Mozart and Sebastian Bach. He's read in the libraries of the ruins of Pompeii and followed, or at least contributed to the discovery of different origins of life. So what he's saying here is basically he's widening his intellectual competency by proclaiming his deciphering of the hidden messages left by famous composers in their scores. Bach and Mozart were very, very good at composing musical pitches to be explaining a wider message, or at least Bach, for instance, spelt out his name in some songs with the musical notation, and then he mentions his role in discovering the evolution of life based off of his studies. And what you see the recurring theme is here is he's visiting different academic disciplines, Kollegah, and claiming his not only competence but expertise in each subject, right? Which is what defines a Universalgenie, somebody who's an expert in many complicated academic disciplines. Whoops. Von den Versen Laotzes lausche den Lehren des Todes unter dem Schwert des Damokles. Sollte die schwärzesten Omen mit unumkehrbarer Logik gebe ein Teil meines Augenlichts für Geistesschärfe wie Odin dick. I love this line. Lernen von Nietzsche und Hegel, two German philosophers and psychologists. And then we have, of course, a nice little reference to ancient Italian writings, which is really cool. I learned, I didn't know anything about this one. It was kind of one of the more interesting findings that I found here going through this song. So, of course, the literal translation is, I learned from Nietzsche and Hegel, and from the verses of Laozi, so it's a Chinese philosopher, to listen to the teachings of the dead under the sword of Damocles. This interprets the darkest omens with irreversible logic. I gave part of my sight for wisdom like Odin. So a lot of, I would say it's a little convoluted here what he's saying, but essentially he's saying that these three philosophers, right, or psychologists, they were famous for digging deep into historical text. However, it comes with a price, right? And that price is the more knowledge power and even fame that you have, more likely you're to accumulate enemies that envy you and sometimes want to kill you. And that's where he references this sword of Damocles. And Damocles' sword refers to this anecdotal ode to King Dionysius II, written by Cicero, right? Ancient Italian um, historian, I believe, or literaire. Digging deep into these ancient teachings bring danger and anxiety, according to Kollegah. So, what this sword represents, it's essentially Damocles was an assistant or some sort of king. He was a king's hand, I believe, to King Dionysius, Dionysius, and he was saying, you are so great, what a lucky guy to have. He's trying to flatter him, what a lucky guy to have all of this fame and power and riches. And he said, okay, well, you want to see how great this is? Why don't you spend a day, in my position? And so he positioned Damocles on the throne, and then directly above the throne, had a sword hanging by a single horse's hair. And of course, this brought great anxiety to Damocles. And the point here was that, sure, to have all of this fame, fortune, power, and even knowledge, as Kollegah says, brings anxiety, uncertainty, and ultimately danger, because in your quest, the quest to this position inevitably brings envy, jealousy, and other figures, other adversaries that will likely look to take you down or dethrone you. And so I learned that through this. That was a pretty cool thing. I never heard of that phrase. And then an omen is a divine symbol, right? He interprets the darkest omens with irreversible logic. An omen is a divine symbol of what is to come, right? What the future may bring, be it good or bad. And so what Kollegah is saying here is knowledge is power, right? Dare to know. However, the more you know, the more you bring danger to yourself, or at least the truth is most likely, the truth of the future and the truth of what is humankind and the events that surround our evolution are often dangerous, bleak, and ominous, right? So to tie that all together, he references Odin. I gave a part of my sight for wisdom like Odin. Odin is a famous Norse god known for giving his vision away in return, so making this sacrifice, in return in return gathering great wisdom, prolonging his wisdom and widening his scope of knowledge about the world. And so what Kollegah is saying here is that, the more you know, you start to make these sacrifices because, in fact, truth brings danger and kind of, the truth hurts. He's going on the saying here. And I didn't know this I about Odin, which I thought was also a cool reference. So you see, we've already gone through psychological, philosophical, musical, and now mythological references, all in just a couple of lines. Really, really interesting. Let's go to the next line. We're almost done here. Let me just find. Here we go. Cocaine in the crack. Cocaine in the crack. We're going to end it on there. Right? So, dekodiere logische Algorithmen in Da Vinci Malereien und brenne der Historie meinen Initiale ein. Bin kein Literat allein, sondern universal gelehrt und schaffe ein fundamentales Werk, das hunderte Jahre währt. Again, nice little rhyme scheme to end this here, right? And what he's saying is, I decoded the logical algorithms in the paintings of Da Vinci, the Da Vinci Code, right? He's referencing the Da Vinci Code. So now he's saying, you know, he's had the mathematical ability to see these other messages. Again, and the theme here consistently throughout the song is using history, the deepest learnings and truths in all of the different academic disciplines to to foresee the most probable outcome in the future, right? To understand the human race, what we do, our human nature, and the fact that, you know, historical events are in fact predictable if you can really understand these this wide array of academic, you know, philosophers, psychologists, mathematicians, as well as religious and musical compositions. And then he says, of course, I burn my initials into history. I am not a one-dimensional intellect, but a universally educated one, and I will and accomplish a fundamental work that lives on for hundreds of years. So again, his rap texts are more than just rap text. They're actually, like myself, you know, bringing knowledge to people like me, and going way above and beyond the limits of, you know, above and beyond the constraints that, you know, some would say German rap has created for itself, um, by studying all of these different intellectual academic domains. Um, and that's it for the second verse, right? And the third verse I know is a little shorter, but I'm definitely going to follow up this video. So long as you guys, you know, please give me a thumbs up. It really, really helps. And if you made it through the entirety of this video, leave a comment, because I just want to know you guys are watching this. I mean, first of all, so awesome, you know, the feedback that I already got. I really, really appreciate it, and really, really help me out if you guys would go ahead and subscribe to my channel, because I love doing this. It takes me hours to kind of go through this and put this presentation together, but it's so awesome. It's so much more rewarding when I know that it's actually reaching somebody through, across the other side of the world, and um, explaining something and maybe teaching something that somebody didn't know before they watched this video. Again, thanks a lot, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you in part 3.